My name is Omar Farooque. I recently graduated from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I'm essentially here to talk to you about what's been happening in Wisconsin, what I've been doing on my campus and statewide. Ever since I started college, I've been involved in my campus, in my state, in some capacity, since essentially my freshman year. I started off with my student government, moved on to the statewide student association, and then worked as an organizer and as an activist, advocating for higher education. This is what it looked like essentially from the beginning of February to mid-March. People were piling in into our state capitol as soon as they heard the news. The way I heard about it was that our governor had informed the National Guard that if there are any disturbances in our police force, that they take over. So essentially kind of declare a little bit of a martial law and bring the military in, so to say, to protect the prisons and all that. And at that point, I wasn't 100% sure what was going on, so I dug in a little bit to find out what was exactly causing the governor to alert the National Guard. And sure enough, he was presenting a bill that would take away the collective bargaining rights for a lot of the people of Wisconsin, public workers of Wisconsin. That same night, hundreds of students from UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin, piled into the State House, essentially saying, we're not going to let this happen. This has never happened before. These are just everyday people who thought that there is so much more that they can do to protect their liberties, their rights, and protect the rights of their neighbors from being taken away by this governor. So they pushed back. Here's this huge problem that we have. Our education system's being essentially diminished by the federal, the state, the local governments. But there are a lot of people who don't know what they can do and what they need to do. What I say to them is organize. We're a very unorganized group of constituency. A lot of students go to school, go back home, do whatever they want, eat food, go to work, watch TV, whatever it is. But a lot of the time they go every day without thinking what they can do, how much power they have. The graphic that we saw all around Wisconsin when the protests were going on, there were T-shirts, the red T-shirts with the white fish on there, which essentially it says a message that no matter how big the fish, if you can organize well enough, you can take over anything you want to and solve any problem in the community that you want. So first, before taking on the organizing job, you must understand how to identify the issue. What is affecting your constituency? You can't pick an issue that someone is being affected up in Wisconsin, bring it to Chicago and say, all right, let's work on this issue. Because it's probably not going to be as applicable, and it's probably not going to affect everybody in the same way that it affects people in Wisconsin. So you have to gather the community. You have to talk to your friends, colleagues, watch local news. Read local newspapers, and figure out that main issue. How are they being affected by the issues that you want them to work on, or that you think would be valuable if you organized around it? Higher education is a pretty universal issue, but it's not universal in the sense that it affects people in Chicago very differently than it affects people up in Wisconsin. So you have to figure that out as well. What kind of issues are people facing that's keeping them from attending higher education? That someone is not your friend until you talk to them. Obviously, your friends can be your classmates, people in your organizations, different student organizations that believe in the same cause as you do. But then it also can go far beyond just the students in the classroom. It can go beyond. You can go up to talking to professors, your administrators, your chancellors, sometimes legislators. In Wisconsin's case, the 14 legislators, the 14 senators that left Wisconsin, we considered them our friends. We were able to invite them to our events. We were able to talk to them more openly. We asked them for ideas on what they could do to help us and what we could do to help them. I didn't realize this up until I started UWM United, that there are so many people that cared about the same issue that I did, that they started calling me. And then they're like, we want to be involved in this movement, just tell us how. There's a lot of give and take in that too. That meant that I had to go help their movement and their communities as well. But when we started UWM United, started off with maybe 3 or 4 organizations. By the time, currently we have about 50 to 60, and it's happened over the course of the past 2 months. So if you can communicate your message well, they're going to want to talk to you. magnitude. But bringing awareness to your cause is very important. If more people know about your cause, it will probably go a lot more, it'll probably go further than you think. And more people would want to join in, and you wouldn't have to worry about being the only one who's running the cause. It has to be a collective issue. It has to be a collective movement. Otherwise, whoever's running the movement is going to get really burnt out, and I've learned from experience. And then you also want to make sure you can have letter writing days. One thing to remember is that protesting always comes after diplomacy. At least that's my rule. There are a lot of people who disagree with me because there's always like direct action and all those things that you can do before you actually diplomatically communicate your issue with them. We saw a lot of successful protesting in Wisconsin in February because there was no more diplomacy left from our government side. Our government was essentially said, we're not going to talk to you, we're not going to listen to anybody, and we're just going to pass this thing through as quickly as possible. And at that point, the lines were drawn. And it was not the protesters that did that. It was the government that said, we're leaving the table. We brought them back at the table. Unfortunately, we failed at keeping collective bargaining on the table, but where we won was we got 6 of the senators recalled, and their recall elections are being held in July, I believe. And this is the most amount of people that have ever been recalled in the history of the United States, not just our state. So that's an important thing to know too, that sooner or later the tides will turn because there are so many angry people in Wisconsin who are going back to their districts and making sure that they get the people elected that they can hold accountable. If you want to make sure the movement's long-lasting, mentor everybody. Mentor the leaders. You have to identify the leaders in your movement, identify the leaders in your organization, and tell them that this is your cause now too. It's not just mine. So give them ownership. And leave the movement better than you found it at first. And that's another important thing that people forget. It's not about you. It's about everybody else at that moment.